A new Axios report claims that President Biden and his top administration officials have been meeting with Republican senators responsible for creating a counterproposal to Biden's infrastructure plans. The report says, quote, the GOP senators say they are optimistic the Biden administration is open to concessions and can reach a compromise. They've been heartened by their talks with White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, Counselor to the President Steve Ricchetti, and Legislative Affairs Director Louisa Terrell.
Former National Press Secretary for the Sanders campaign, contributing editor at Current Affairs, co-host of the Bad Faith podcast, Briahna Joy Gray. She joins us now. Good to see you, Briahna. What did you make of these talks generally and where you think things are headed?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole point of this infrastructure bill was that there were kind of two sections, one that was traditional infrastructure and one that had some of these universal pre-K, free public education, or that is a bridge too far, actually, speaking of infrastructure, but free community college and these kinds of less traditional but community infrastructure projects. If you embrace the severability of those things, then you're less likely to be able to get some of the less traditional aspects in through an infrastructure bill, which is broadly popular even on a bipartisan basis. The idea of branding everything as infrastructure was ostensibly to say to Republicans who've been talking about needing infrastructure packages for a really long time that this is something that's for you too. Now having conversations about separating these two things out and negotiating with Republicans to throw all of the kind of substantive societal support kind of things by the wayside kind of undermines the value of the plan. However, I think that a lot of this might be motivated by the fact that Joe Manchin has said recently that he doesn't support those other aspects of the infrastructure bill either. And so your likelihood of getting this done through reconciliation with the 50 votes that you would need, every single Democrat on board, are seemingly diminishing as fast as our chances for a $15 minimum wage or any number of other progressive policies that, of course, the majority of Americans want.
Mm-hmm. So what do you make of the strategy here? Because two things. Number one, I mean, it just seems unlikely to me that you're going to get a single Republican on board, even with just the hard infrastructure components, because what you're talking about is paying for that piece with tax hikes on corporations. Not a single Republican is going to support that. So it kind of seems like a waste of time. But then that makes me wonder if this is just like a way for them to sort of message about their bipartisan outreach, which, you know, the conservative press has been hitting them over, even though I don't know that that critique has really landed. So what do you make of what they're actually up to here?
I think that's probably right. I think this is a lot of bipartisan cosplay. If somebody were really interested in doing something on a bipartisan basis, the kind of bipartisanship and unity that I'm interested in is the kind that looks at what Republican voters are actually interested in, which is a lot of things on this Democratic list. The idea that we keep playing these games and asking to filter bipartisanship through what a bunch of corporate Republicans want done in tandem with what a bunch of corporate Democrats want done, instead of taking the case directly to the American people who overwhelmingly want and need things like home health care aids. We just are at the tail end, hopefully, of a pandemic, which is going to have far-reaching long consequences for people. Long COVID is a problem. The elderly have long had this incredible burden of both expensive care and the caregivers themselves being woefully undercompensated for the important work they do. All of these kinds of issues are addressed by this bill, and framing the whole thing as some kind of partisan fight, as though there aren't old sickly Republicans and Republican healthcare workers who are unable to support their own families as they're taking care of others, is really kind of unconscionable.
And Briahna, on the piece of the severability, because I think that part is really interesting as well, Saagar floated the idea that they're essentially putting the social welfare pieces together, not because they actually have any intent of passing them, but maybe as a way to drive up turnout in the midterms. Like, look, universal pre-K, free community college, the child tax credit, these things are they're actually really popular in general. They're very popular with the Democratic base. This would be a message that they could take to voters and say, look, you give us 2 more years, then we're going to be able to get this piece done. Do you think that is what's going on here as well? You've got the bipartisan cosplay on the infrastructure piece, and then you've got a sort of like, we're actually trying to get this passed cosplay on the social welfare piece.
Maybe. I don't know who would fall for it at this point. The Democrats are planning, it seems, to spend Biden's first year coming up with excuses for why he can't do anything. And the parliamentarian and Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are in likelihood not going anywhere. So if the case that you're planning to make to the American people at midterms is, we couldn't really do anything for you in the first go around, but I promise, pinky swear, that we're going to be able to magically disappear all of these obstacles that we created for ourselves in the second time around. I don't know if that's going to fly with Americans who are, at this point in our history, very, very, very used to being disappointed by leadership. If they want to make that case, I think that they should try harder to deliver something really tangible now. I don't think that you can exhaust your load, as it were. I don't think that there's any risk of saying, oh, we delivered a $15 minimum wage so the people are satisfied. I think that really understates how hard it is out there for the majority of Americans. And delivering on something is the best case that you can make. Delivering now is the best case you can make for being able to deliver on something later.
Very well said. Briahna, great to see you.
Thanks, Briahna.
Same here.
Next up, Iramiose Frimpong, a.k.a. the Funky Academic, is going to join us when Rising continues.